Hello and welcome to Insight Weekly, an intelligence fusion podcast. Once again, I've gathered a team of IF analysts to give you a roundup of the most significant incidents from across the globe this week. Some quick intros for those who are new to the podcast. We have Viraj, who is responsible for our coverage across Africa.
Hi, Laura.
Max, who leads in Asia and the Middle East.
Hi, Laura.
Vincent, who is our senior regional analyst for the Americas.
Hi, Laura.
We've got one of Team IF's latest additions, Matt, who will be reporting on Europe this week.
Hi, Laura.
And on the line we have Megan, our regional analyst for North America.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Megan. What's been happening in the US this week?
Okay, so on Monday the 13th, we had a record-breaking drug seizure at the port of Lukeville in Arizona. And Customs and Border Protection seized $1.7 million worth of drugs, including methamphetamine, heroin, cannabis, and fentanyl. So the seizure was the third largest seizure of methamphetamine at Arizona ports, sort of in the history of Customs and Border Protection seizures. So both people arrested were US residents who had been transporting the drugs in the floor of an RV vehicle. And both have since been charged with drug trafficking. So I think this is sort of representative of a lot of trend going on at the border at the moment, where increasingly large drug seizures are happening at ports of entry rather than between them. And increasingly, the officials are seizing harder drugs such as methamphetamine and heroin rather than marijuana, because since it's been legalized in many states, it's no longer so profitable for organized crime groups.
Thank you, Megan. Moving across the border and into Colombia, Vincent is up next.
Yeah, so on Sunday, the Transandino pipeline was targeted with an explosive device along the road between Pasto and Tumaco, more specifically at the height of the village of Llorente. The explosion itself damaged the pipeline and caused a minor oil spill, but more specifically, a taxi driver nearby was wounded while driving when he was hit by shrapnel. He was taken to the hospital and his condition is not yet known. Authorities have attributed the attack to the ELN, and the attack itself is important because it shows a continuation of the ELN's activity in targeting oil infrastructure in Colombia in 2020. Primarily, the group targets the Caño Limón pipeline in the northeast of the country, but the Transandino pipeline is usually the second most targeted. The incident itself is also fits in with the ELN's activities in the last 7 days, which has also seen them target military bases such as the Yopal Air Force Base and police stations. They've also been attributed to a few assassinations of social leaders as well.
Thank you, Vincent. I believe you're taking us over to China this week, Max.
Yeah, that's right. So in China on Sunday, the 12th of January, there was two shootings, with one in Hohhot City and the other over in Liaoning in the northeast of China. So the first in Hohhot involved a male suspect who took 3 hostages during the incident. And the man was armed with a homemade gun as well as homemade explosives, although the nature of the weapon and the explosives still there's no details about just yet. During negotiations, they eventually broke down and police came to the decision to shoot the suspect, killing him at the scene. The motivation for the incident still isn't clear, as Chinese media often is keeps their cards very close to their chest about this sort of incident. So very few details have been released since the shooting. The second shooting, which took place in Liaoning, involved a man who attempted to stab a police officer before stabbing himself. He injured himself before being shot and killed by police at the scene. Again, the reason for this incident isn't quite clear, but it's believed to have been a death by police attempt at suicide. These two incidents are significant within China simply because shooting and gun crime is believed to be very, very rare. Exact statistics on gun crime in China aren't available, as China doesn't publish its own data, but with that said, very few incidents are reported. In the past, we have come across isolated incidents involving explosives and firearms, even so, the incidents themselves that are reported are very rare and often isolated cases. For the time being, details about both these incidents remain quite unclear.
Thank you, Max. And over to Viraj with his insight into Kenya.
Yeah, so earlier this week, suspected Al-Shabaab militants carried out an attack in Kamute in Garissa County, during which 3 teachers were killed. This follows the major attack on US and Kenyan forces at Manda airstrip in Lamu County. Attacks carried out by suspected Al-Shabaab militants in eastern and northeastern Kenya have so far continued in intensity since December 2019, where a number of attacks were recorded. In the latter part of 2019, there were numerous reports of terrorist movement in these regions of Kenya. Terrorism, insecurity, and even curfews in some cases have stalled development and disrupted livelihoods, and recent attacks are having the same effect despite security measures put in place, with Lamu County being a case in point. Local politicians in Garissa have accused the police of not acting on credible intelligence, and have called for a more holistic approach involving local residents, teachers, elders, and leaders.
Thank you, Viraj. And finally, Matt, discussing the security situation in Europe this week.
Well, to begin with, being currently tracking quite a few protests which have been occurring in northern France since 6 o'clock on 6 a.m. on the 16th of January 2020. There have been several protests in up in that area with and quite a few which are about to occur or will occur in the not too distant future. All of these protests are focusing on the current issue of pension reform in France. Now, the protests which have been occurring in Calais, Boulogne-sur-Mer, Douai, and Valenciennes, a lot of them have been large crowds but peaceful protest marches. However, with the exception of one, the protest in Boulogne-sur-Mer this morning saw a number of roadblocks being constructed on roundabouts which required police to respond. Now, protests in France, of course, are nothing new. It's a very frequent incident that occurs in the country. However, down in Paris, there's been an announcement by a number of unions to have more of these protests to occur on January 24. So there could be quite a number of more of these style of protests, and the potential for more protests which will require a heavy police presence to occur within the next fortnight in relation to pension reform. Over to Germany as well. Another incident we've been tracking is a number of raids which have been carried out by German authorities. Since 14th of January 2020, German police have been conducting raids targeting Islamists. Now, areas they've been focusing on include, but are not limited to, Berlin, Brandenburg, and North Rhine-Westphalia. So far, we've got information about 5 arrests being made of Chechen nationals. And the investigations appear to be ongoing, but what does appear to be known so far is that the members who were arrested appear to have had at least 2 targets in mind.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, everyone. As always, if you're watching this on our social media channels, I will pop the link in the comments so you can sign up to our mailing list. And that means you can receive any new episodes of Insight Weekly directly to your inbox. See you all next week.